Your hair is glowing in the sun, your hand in mine so warmly bound. It's bright outside and bright inside. Mid-afternoon, minister, we're free to wander anywhere. No more hatred in the stairs. Everyone's busy, minds their own, so it's just me and you and my Syrian. Not long ago, the dogs are worn.
Good morning, brothers and sisters. Nice to meet you again. And today we're just going to have a brief episode because some new data came out of England, of all places. It looks like a lot of turmoil is like rocking England these days. Their prime minister, who was sort of like a more disheveled version of our Trump, I think he still is. But yeah, it's like, got caught partying hard while everybody was in lockdown. And now, thanks to a Freedom of Information Act, the Minister of Health was forced to release the real data about COVID deaths. So now, while we on this show support vaccines for all the people that are at risk, all the people that have health conditions, and all the people that really feel like they need to have a vaccine, I myself took it. When it first came out, I took the Pfizer jab in order to be able to travel, see my parents. So we are not anti-vaccine in any form. We're just anti-mandates and anti-vaccine hysteria, or vaxteria, as we like to call it. And we are also thinking that this vaccine thing has been co-opted by the powers that be and the big pharma to install a mind form that is aimed at total mental control of the individuals. This is a very scary path. It is very hard to understand why people don't grasp the dangers related to the government mandating procedures and then asking requirements to join everyday life. While there are some precedents, like in massive vaccinations, these vaccinations for polio and measles were actually aimed at protecting the individuals, not the community, and they were eradicating the virus. This vaccine doesn't eradicate the virus. There's mounting evidence that early treatment, very effective early treatment, has been suppressed constantly throughout the entire pandemic, thus leading to the death of millions of people that could have been prevented if these early treatments were implemented. So again, not against the vaccine per se, but against this delirious drift, authoritarian drift, which, of course, people are waking up to. But let's go back into our main point, which is the English government was forced to release the real figures of COVID deaths. For this, we're going to rely on our amazing guru, Jimmy Dore. And then a big shout out to all the podcasters out there, Joe Rogan, Jimmy Dore, The Gray Zone, and Russell Brand, and all those that have put themselves out there and have been excruciated by critics and detractors nonstop. And now things are coming around. We are actually in a period where the mainstream media has become so let's say, controlled and hijacked by the ones with money, that is hardly reliable anymore. So let's get into it. This is what Jimmy posted yesterday. Jimmy has been very, very attentive to what he posts. He has reached agreements with YouTube. He's just abiding by the rules. He wanted to know exactly what the rules were so that they wouldn't block his posts and take down his channel, as it happened to many other free voices. And, excuse me. So when he goes out and puts out something like this, it's because it's bomb-proof. So Mr. Campbell in England has been doing great research, documenting, requesting documents, posting scientific evidence about the claims of the pharmaceutical companies and the ones that are being discredited. And then so he's done great work, pretty much shedding a little bit of light on what we weren't able to ascertain before. Just recently, the head of the CDC was questioned about from a Fox commentator about the real numbers. Who are the people that died for COVID exclusively, not with COVID, not for other comorbidities while having COVID, just people that were healthy and died because of COVID. And she refused to give the number. She said she couldn't provide a number because the figures were still moving. That's like complete and utter deception. It's not true. They have the numbers. The English government was forced to release it, and here are the numbers. Let's listen, and then we'll comment on it.
What is the death rate of COVID? We've tried to figure it out here. You know, we've done 2 videos on it so far, and nobody knows. Well, I think a lot of people know, but they're not telling us what the real COVID death rate is. Well, our friend, Dr. John Campbell, over across the pond in the UK, they did a Freedom of Information request in the UK from the British government or England government or UK government.
They have that also, the Freedom of Information Act in the UK?
Yeah, I didn't know, right? This is when I found out about it through this. So let's watch. John Campbell is going to tell you what the real death rate is in the UK, and the answer is going to surprise you. Here we go.
Well, welcome to today's talk. It's Thursday, the 20th of January. Now, there's been an awful lot of debate about deaths in this pandemic. And there's a new Freedom of Information request release from the United Kingdom that shows the number of deaths actually solely attributable to COVID may be way lower than anyone had thought.
What?
And if this data applies to the UK, I'm sure it applies to the United States, Canada, European countries, all the others.
Are you a doctor?
Are you a doctor?
He's no Tony Science.
So you mean all the stuff that they've been saying for 2 years straight about the death rate has been bullshit? Well, let's find out. I don't know.
What we might call advanced economy countries, it will also apply to, I would imagine. Now, it's interesting. Let's look at it. So here we have, this is the 30th of March 2020 to the 7th of January 2022. In other words, this is basically this is the time of the pandemic when people have been dying, up to the 7th of January. Office for National Statistics, obviously, it's a couple of weeks behind, but it's not bad.
So the reason why everything sounds sped up, because it's sped up, and Jimmy wants to speed it up and keep it moving. So here it goes. Sometimes it sounds a little garbled, but that's why. 127,704 excess deaths above the 5-year average. So this was like, Jim is going to say about this. This was the way that COVID deaths were calculated initially. There was an average of deaths across the years, or an average of deaths was calculated about with, regard to how many people died every year, make an average of that. So during the COVID year, like there was a surge in deaths. And so that was considered COVID deaths. That's kind of like a sketchy way to begin with, because in the COVID year, those deaths could have been driven, not specifying the cause of death, but just considering the deaths themselves could have been driven by whatever factors. People could have suicided en masse at home and have driven up the number of deaths, and then attributing that to COVID is already scientifically flawed system to do that. It's a quick way. How many people died during 2020? And is this superior to the average? So those must be caused by COVID. This is not scientific at all, especially because when you die, they ascertain what kind of death you have, or they should be doing so. So they should have clear numbers, and they had them. They just didn't say. Let's keep going.
So do you understand what that means? So the normal death rate, they had an excess of 127,704 extra deaths that were over the average normal death rate. And people attribute that to COVID. So that's what he's saying there. You see that? Okay, just want to make sure.
We have often thought that this is perhaps the most accurate way to look at deaths. Not so much who died from what, when, but how many more people have died than we would expect. The difference being, of course, we've been living through this pandemic. So that's probably a pretty good indicator. But this next one here, official data. Now, this is deaths within 28 days of a positive test. Now, this is data as of the 19th of January, so it's yesterday, always up to date, a day late. Well, it's a day late. It's now the 20th. This is up to date as of the 19th. Death within 28 days of a positive test, 359 daily deaths, which is good to see. That's come down a bit lately, and 152,872 total deaths. So we have one figure for the total deaths there, 127,000. We have another figure for the total deaths there within 28 days of a positive test, 152,872. And then where COVID-19 is mentioned on the death certificate as a contributory factor to death, 174,000.
Did you see that? Do you see that sleight of hand? It went from 120 some thousand, then it went to 152, and now the official number is 174,000 deaths. Those are three totally different numbers. Keep watching.
We've already got three different figures, but now we've got a fourth, and this fourth figure is just a little over 17,000 deaths. And,
What? What? Now they have a fourth figure, and the fourth figure is just around 17,000. Not 170, not 150, not 120. 17,000? Here we go.
I'm doing this as a single video because I'm still processing this information. It's really quite profound. Now, this is from a Freedom of Information request. Deaths from COVID-19 with no other underlying cause. In other words, people that were otherwise healthy, that don't have heart disease, that don't have lung disease, that don't have diabetes, and yet died of COVID-19. Freedom of Information request. And the Freedom of Information request was answered by the Office for National Statistics, and you can read the actual report there. Now, this actually came out last month. And I've just discovered it yesterday. That's why I wanted to bring it to you now. There's been no mention of this whatsoever on mainstream media.
I wonder why.
At least on the BBC, sort of ITV, Channel 4 in the UK. And
I wonder why they wouldn't want people to know the real death count. I wonder why. Maybe because people would stop shitting their pants and putting up with all their authoritarianism. Maybe that's why. Maybe that's why they had to suppress early treatments. Maybe that's why. Who knows? It is a coinky dink, isn't it? That this has been out for a month and I got to go to YouTube to find it? Yes.
So also the other thing that is happening in England right now, they lifted all the restrictions on COVID. I'm trying to figure out exactly, because again, it was not reported on the mainstream media, or it was reported tangentially. I don't know how many people really know about this, but England decided to lift all restrictions on COVID, which means assembly, masking, whatever. And this is shocking because it apparently, what other factors have come up to the light that justifies this decision. Also, the decision here in the United States to reduce the quarantine period to 5 days. That was totally arbitrary. People ascribed it to the fact that big companies put pressure on the CDC to reduce the number of days because they couldn't find anyone to work anymore. Because people would feel sick and would stay home for the full 2 weeks. And now this is going against interest. That's an explanation. Another explanation is that I think people are starting at the top, are starting to see that the deception and the complete cover-up that was done is not working anymore. So now people are starting to cover their ass, as they used to say, and then kind of look for reason to say, well, you see, as soon we adjusted the data as soon as we came to know, which is a complete fabrication. It's a complete lie. They knew from the get-go. And it is hard to believe that they didn't know. If you notice, all the reports and all the critics always bring up the death tally. It's never broken down by deaths, age range, and then type of deaths, comorbidities. These are all scientific factors that need to be kept into account when you're trying to analyze and determine the real mortality of this disease. So by removing all those factors and just focusing on the deaths, it is a very, very deceptive way to go about things. And while the numbers could be there, what the numbers really mean is a complete different matter. As I was saying, the rise in deaths could have been created by a multiple number of factors, home violence, killings at home, could be mass suicide. It could be, if you don't specify what the cause of death is, this leaves us open to complete wild interpretations, and the figures don't mean anything without markers that allow us to place them where they really belong. So this is coming. I'm going to play a few more things, because Campbell goes into describing what is the age range. That's the other thing that I always debate against people that attack me personally when I question the official narrative. What is the age range? Because if the main victims of this disease, as we knew from the beginning, are elderly and people with health conditions, those are the people that we need to protect at the fullest, including early treatments. The vigil wait waiting for them to die at home is a criminal act. It's like the deception, and it's like, you know, the betrayal of the oath, of the medical oath of healing people and doing no harm by prohibiting them to access effective treatments. And now a lot of them are coming up to the surface, including monoclonal antibodies and other treatments that are completely scarce. They were widely available before the pandemic, and now they're completely scarce. So there is a big thing going on, and then it's slowly bubbling up to the surface. And when it will do, people hopefully will realize they've been lied to and they've been deceived, and then so they will take proper action. Because now this is what is important, is that it's important that people that did this are gonna bear responsibility and pay the consequences for their criminal actions that has led to the deaths of millions of people for one reason or another. So let's look at the analytics on the age range, because that was also released in the FOIA Act, which had never been able to access before. So they lump in, like, to make an example, if 100 people die and then 90% are above 70 years old, and then 10% are below 70 years old, saying that the mortality of this disease is of 15%, that's a complete false statement. It's 15% because the older people are driving up the numbers. But it's a very, very mild disease to most of the people. This is very important. I want you guys to understand that this is very, very important, because over-vaccination is counterproductive and ineffective, as it's obviously demonstrated by the fact that everybody that is double or triple vaccinated is still getting the virus, is still spreading it around. So this is very, very important to understand. It's just a boon for the pharmaceutical company, and the governments played a role in the spread of misinformation in order to terrorize the citizens. We're going to talk about trauma-induced mind control in another episode, but this is very important to understand what the people that are rebelling to is the perception that they're being manipulated under false scientific pretenses. This hatred between vaxxed and non-vaxxed and anti-vaxxed or whatever is a fake construct. The most important thing is that you are being manipulated to hate your neighbors and the people around you under false scientific pretenses. This is of the utmost seriousness. People need to wake up. The problem is not around you or below you. The problem is above you. Above you. You have to open your eyes, think for a minute, get out of the terror that, like, this constant stream of deception has induced into you. Go back to living your own life. Okay? You want to get vaccinated? Please do. Please get vaccinated. Please do whatever makes you feel safe, but do not hate anybody. Because in the hate, there's the demonstration that this is an act of manipulation. If you're feeling that your rage is directed against your peers, you are being manipulated. Nobody is endangering you. A non-vaccinated person is not endangering you more than a vaccinated person, because they both spread the disease equally. Okay? And this disease, if you're a healthy individual and you take precautions and you live a healthy lifestyle, has very, very little chances of killing you, let alone bringing you to the hospital in the first place. If you're a child, there is zero chance. So the vaccine mandate for children is criminal, because the damage that can come from the vaccines is higher than the damage that can come from the disease itself. Everybody that's been telling you otherwise has lied to you. The figures are minuscule on the CDC acceptance as well, and admission as well. The figures are so minuscule to be considered irrelevant. When you hear people that terrorize you as a parent and tell you that children die or are hospitalized by the hundreds of thousands, it's a complete fabrication. Hospitals are admitting children, and all these children have COVID and don't even know that they have it. So there, again, the use of figures. How many people were hospitalized with COVID? not because of COVID. If you use that figure to drive your narrative and push vaccines for children, which are criminal, and you can ask or read about any virologist that is worth his dime, that is not working for Pfizer or is not doing studies, that will all tell you children must not be vaccinated. That's how you develop herd immunity. That's how let the new generations that are stronger not die of this disease and become accustomed to this disease. We will be with us for the rest of our lives. So I'm going to listen and play the figures, and then we're going to wrap it up.
In anything on the US channels that I follow. So surprising that they haven't picked this up, because it's a huge story.
Yeah.
For media to cover, and they haven't. Deaths registered from 2020 and 2021. So death registration for 2020 and 2021. For deaths where COVID-19 was listed as the underlying cause of death, as the underlying cause, but had no other pre-existing condition recorded on the death certificate for England and Wales. So this is just England and Wales data. It's not actually for all of the UK. And this will be updated quarterly. So this takes us up for the first 3 quarters. So this information is for deaths in 2020, all of 2020, and the first 3 quarters. That's up to September, isn't it? 2021. And let's look at what it is. And without being melodramatic about it, it's really quite surprising. Surprisingly low. So here we have deaths for 2020. So the total deaths where COVID-19 was the only cause of death on the death certificate. Therefore, we can assume that the people didn't have comorbidities. So that's for 2020. The total deaths was 9,400. 0 to 64 was 1,549. Over 65s was 7,851. And actually, the average age, when we take all these together, for the whole figures of combined, the average age was about 81.5 years or thereabouts.
Now, what's interesting about this number? So of all the people who died from COVID under 64 years old was about 1,500 people. And of all the people over 65 who died of COVID was around 8,000 people. So if you put these together, and the average age of someone dying from COVID is 81.5 years. The interesting thing about that number is that's older than the natural life expectancy. So we're all shitting our pants over a virus that kills you later than your natural life expectancy is anyway. That's interesting. That's an interesting statistic, don't you think? He's got more to say.
So even though these are over 65s, the vast majority of these were much older. So that was for 2020. And of course, that was the first year of the pandemic. We had no vaccines. Treatments were just being developed. Now, first quarter, January, February, March 2021, total deaths from COVID-19, 6,483 for all of England and Wales. 0 to 64 years of age, 1,560. Over 65, 4,923 total deaths. And again, the average age here was around about that 81.5 year mark. The average age much greater. Second quarter, so it's January, February, March, April, May, June, for 2021, total deaths were 346, because of course we had a dip then. 0 to 64, 153, over 65 is 193, so pretty low. The third quarter, taking us up to September, total deaths 1,142, 0 to 64, 521, 65 and over 630. So where COVID-19 is the only attributable cause of death, we see that the rate of death is actually remarkably low.
Low.
Now, all right. So as you saw, and then we're gonna wrap it up here. Like as you saw, the figures showed a decrease. So what's happening, because it was mainly driven by elderly people dying. Once these elderly people got protected and vaccinated, the numbers dropped drastically. So here again, science is based on numbers and data analysis. So this is data. This is what it requested. It took a Freedom of Information Act to force the government to give these numbers. Why do you think that is? That's because the government was not interested in giving you the right numbers, because otherwise people would have demanded protection and early treatments for elderly patients. We can get like forever in that, and we're not interested in that. The right course of action would have been protecting the elderly, the only ones, and letting the rest of the people do however they felt like doing. They felt like they needed vaccination, there should have been a meat available to them if they felt that they didn't need vaccination. And I can tell you, if these were the numbers that were broadcast and publicized and spoken by the media, then nobody would have taken this vaccine in a range up to 50 years old, because there is no need. And especially if you do early treatments, there's absolutely no need. So now we're like, the numbers are starting to come out and people are starting to shit their pants, because somebody's going to go down for this eventually, because the whole entire world economy got crushed. They say that 500 million people dropped into poverty during COVID. What about those 500 million? You know how many of those will die because of poverty? You know how many of those will commit suicide? You know how many of those have mental problems for the rest of their lives because of this? So where is the accountability? Where is the responsibility towards the people that a government should have? Also, while in England, they asked for a Freedom of Information Act and they got the information right away, here in the United States, Pfizer and the FDA had connived to make the vaccine stats. Remember, nobody has even asked the Freedom of Information Act about the real deaths like they did in England, which is the crux of the matter. But here in the United States, somebody forced the FDA to release the real data about the vaccine, and then how effective it is, and what are the consequences of the vaccines on people. That before, the FDA and Pfizer had connived to have a 75-year time frame for release. So the data about what happened in 2020 would have been released in 2096. Now, because of the Freedom of Information Act, the FDA was forced to release the vaccine studies and the data about vaccines. And now they took themselves 8 months, in which they will try probably to erase all the data, or will be heavily redacted. They 8 months because they don't have time to, basically don't have people. They say they only have 12 people that can work on this and release the data. We're actually believing the FDA has thousands and thousands of employees, cannot divert a few more employees. They had like a month. In a month, they made up to analyze all the data from Pfizer and make a call on the vaccine in a month. So now it takes them 8 months to release the same data to the public. But again, the Freedom of Information Act is a very powerful tool that somebody knows how to use has forced the governments to release the real data. So here we are in 2022, bitterly divided at each other's throats for reasons that have nothing to do with our health, with our protection, with our sanity. They're all to do with government control. This, stop hating your neighbors, stop hating the people around you. Open your eyes, think with your mind. Do not listen to the mainstream media anymore, because they obviously lie. They're all brought to you by Pfizer and the major corporations. So please stop hating. Open your mind, because stuff is about to go down, and you want to say at least at the end that you were on the right side of things. Okay? Stop. Peace be with y'all, and then see you next episode. All right? Love y'all. Bye-bye.